What's up, MetaNerdz? In this video, we're going to talk about how Kuat Drive Yards almost joined the rebellion, and to understand the fears of Kuat Drive Yards and Emperor Palpatine, you need to understand Kuat's relationship to the Republic. Kuat Drive Yards is one of the oldest and most powerful companies in the history of the galaxy, being established by a group of 10 wealthy aristocrats from the core worlds. They picked the planet Kuat, terraformed it, and removed whatever wildlife they didn't want to deal with, before establishing a massive orbital shipyard. Kuat Drive Yards was born, and though we do not have an official year for its opening, by the year 5000 BBY, they had already become the dominant shipyard company. They really only had two other competitors, Corellian Engineering Corporation and Rendili Star Drives, and these three companies would remain the largest starship manufacturers for the next 5 millennia. But the issue of Star Wars megacorporations is a topic that deserves its own video. Over all this time, and throughout the many years from the Old Republic era, and up through the Clone Wars, Kuat and these other companies had remained independent. They never fell under the ownership of the Republic, and were just regulated by the type of weapons they could produce, and who they could sell it to. When needed, they could pump out warships, but in times of peace, they would supply smaller and lighter armed vessels for planetary defense, and for protecting trade ships from pirates. When Palpatine became Emperor, he could just declare that companies were now owned by the government, and that was that. It wasn't against the law, because in effect Palpatine was the Senate, and as mentioned in the nationalization video, Palpatine started to use the threat of takeover by Fiat to scare owners into selling their private businesses to imperial officials like governors, senators, and moffs. The major companies like Kuat were the most safe, and were experiencing massive profits from Palpatine's new directives to create a larger military, but they were also worried about the Emperor's increased involvement. No longer was Kuat Drive Yards producing vessels for independent planetary defense forces, with now all of their contracts being with the Empire, and a new Moff was appointed to the Kuat sector, and what everybody knew was to keep an eye on them, and make sure they respected Imperial authority. A company that was independent for over 5,000 years, now had to run things by Imperial agents, and was held to very difficult shipbuilding quotas. Like I said before, they were making a ton of credits, but Palpatine's power creep particularly worried the leader of KYD, a man referred to as the Kuat of Kuat. Another problem was the other ruling Kuati families, who also worried about the Empire, felt that the current Kuat of Kuat was too weak for these trying times. Palpatine became most aware of these tensions when Kuat Drive Yards didn't want to support the Death Star program. Though it was logical to think that they just feared the Empire would use less and less Star Destroyers once it finished its superweapon, the Emperor did worry if their reservations were more from a fear of his growing power. The latter did play a huge part in the Kuat of Kuat's thinking, as he did not see how their world could remain independent, no matter how many Star Destroyers they built, if there was a hyperspace-traveling battle station that could turn your planet into dust. Being the hereditary CEO, it was dawning on him that Kuat Drive Yards' days were at an end, and he would be the last in the line of hundreds of royal ancestors. Seriously considering turning against the Empire, he considered secretly supplying Star Destroyers to the Rebel Alliance, but there was no way to get it past them off, and it wasn't like he could just pick up the planetary ring and hide the shipyards in the Outer Rim somewhere. The Empire was already in the possession of hundreds of Star Destroyers and Super Star Destroyers that would just appear out of hyperspace and destroy whatever ships he tried to revolt with, torture and or kill him, and now have the perfect reason to nationalize the company. Feeling the pressure from the other Kuati families, the Emperor, and stuck without any options, the Kuat of Kuat decided that the ancient and most powerful shipyard in the galaxy would die with him. He could help the rebellion not by trying to sneak out some ships, but by dealing a severe blow to Imperial morale and productivity, and so he placed explosives throughout the shipyard. Boba Fett had a bone to pick with the KYD leader, and happened to ambush him just as he was about to set off the explosives. After a brief conversation, the Kuati nobleman set off the chain reaction, which begun to blow the shipyard apart. Boba escaped in the ship that the Kuat of Kuat was planning to die on, which broke the chain of explosions, and ended up saving 80% of the shipyards from being destroyed. With his plans in ruin, Kuat of Kuat took his own life, and just as he feared, the Empire used this opportunity to rule Kuat Drive Yards with a heavy hand, directly operating the company, and pushing aside the other families with hereditary claims. So that's it for the story of how Kuat Drive Yards almost joined the rebellion, and all this comes from the books in the Bounty Hunter Wars trilogy, and there are a ton of other details involving Fett and Shizor that I left out in order to focus on Kuat's potential turn. I thought this was a great and tragic story that shows how close the galaxy came to a dramatic change that would have altered the course of the Galactic Civil War. In future videos, I want to go over the history of the founding Kuat families and how the threat of pirates helped to make the CIS possible. If you want to connect with us, help support this channel, or get the reference material mentioned in this video, be sure to check out the links in the description. But most important of all, remember, always have a contingency plan that can account for Boba Fett, and the Force will be with you, always.